Everyone. Hoping that this Wednesday finds everyone well in our four-part series, part two, cybersecurity. We're really super excited to have you here. Again, for those of you who don't know about SCORE and what an amazing organization this is, as part of the Small Business Administration, this is actually a free service to you if you have a small business and you're looking for mentoring or business education. There are over 300 chapters across the country that are here to help you in starting your business, in growing your business, in research and planning, exit strategies. We're here to help you. And certainly through the series, you're getting introduced to many of our top mentors and folks that are affiliated with this organization. And we want to thank our community partners, because without them, obviously, we wouldn't be able to provide these services to you and give you the information that we're bringing to you tonight. We are super excited to have Mirdad here. He is, as much of an expert as you can be in cybersecurity, he has that on lockdown. Been doing this for over 20 years in information systems and technology industry. He has his bachelor's degree in computer science, his MBA, very strong educational background, but also he's worked with a lot of businesses of various sizes, and just huge feather in his cap to have worked to secure technology infrastructure for Minnesota state government. So certainly someone who has a vast expertise in the arena of cybersecurity, and he's used to working with multiple organizations. We want to welcome Mirdad. Thank you so much for doing this with us out of Minnesota. And we're the Minnesota chapter, so close, yet so far away.
Yeah, we're close. We're actually closer than you think. So
exactly. So we appreciate your time and expertise here. Definitely want to have an opportunity for you to share that information. And folks, if you've got questions, certainly in the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen, you're welcome to note your questions. And I will be providing Mirdad with those questions at the end of the session.
all right, let me share my screen. Thank you, Paula, for that great introduction, and good evening, everyone. I think we have an exciting workshop presentation, and I hope everyone walks away with some additional information. Clearly, I don't know everybody's level of involvement with technology, with cybersecurity specifically. If nothing, this will be a refresher, but I am hoping that you're gonna walk away with some new information and new way of looking at technology. So that's my goal. We'll see how far we get. All right. Today's takeaways, basically, again, just be aware of what's involved in the world of technology and in conjunction with businesses, especially small businesses, what risks are involved, and how to be a smarter and a better decision maker when it comes to selecting technology for your small business. We have a couple of poll questions along the way, and we will pop those up as we go along. So I would appreciate if you take a couple of minutes to answer those questions so we have a better understanding of the participants. So, all right. I guess did anybody get the question? I thought we were supposed to have a question at this point, but, oh, there we go. Anybody get a chance to respond to the questions? All right. Continuing on. In the past 12 months, between 2019 and 2020, about 43% of small businesses in one shape or another were victim of cyber attacks, cyber crimes. And the average cost of these attacks for small businesses were about $200,000. And you might be thinking, well, you know, Mehrdad, my business is not even worth $200,000 in some cases. You know, I am personally a owner of a small business, and I can say that, yeah, my business, when it comes to net value, may not amount to 200,000, but there are a number of factors on which we'll get into. And surprisingly, more than 90% of these attacks still come through emails, good old-fashioned email. And you'd be surprised to know how many people fall victim and take the bait on spam emails. So how does that 200,000 come to be? So it's not just about how much net value you pour into your business or you're going to lose, but you know, aggregation of number of different factors, you know, loss of your reputation, you know, losing customer data, customer information, financial losses that go along with that, penalties that you may incur if you have, you know, if you need to comply with certain regulations, and if you misstep with those regulations, those are all accumulated cost of those disruption to your business. And of course, the hardware or software that you will need to replace because of the loss that you incur as a result of those attacks. So how do you go about protecting your business? You basically, of course, depending on the size of your business, some of us, just a one-man shop, 2 or 3 man shop, woman shop, or some are bigger organizations. But typically, you want to take a 3-prong approach, and that comes down to knowing your technology, having some procedures and guidelines in place, and having good people around you. And some of these could be a little daunting. Technology could be as simple as email, knowing how to use email properly. Along the way, letting your people know how to use email properly. And procedure doesn't need to be a 10-page policy and document. It could be as simple as a 2-paragraph that, Mr. Jones, you work for this organization, I'm a small business owner, and I appreciate that you take the right precautions when you're handling emails for the business. For instance, during your lunch break, don't navigate, don't go surfing sites that you wouldn't normally do, as part of the business operation, because those malicious, those innocuous looking sites could have malicious software, whether knowingly or not, embedded on their site. And by clicking here and there, you inadvertently inherit some of those malicious code, and you would even know. So training is another big part of this. So it really comes down to, again, 3 pieces. Have your technology in place, have some guidelines, and educate and train your staff how to use those guidelines. So we have another question popping up. Please take a moment to interact with that question. Just gives us an idea of whether you have been a victim or suffered any consequences. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a question about guidelines. Okay, we'll continue. So some of the steps that you can take fairly easily, these are quick measures, quick steps that you can take to protect your business. These include making sure your patches, your software, both operating system and your application software are up to date and they're current, especially security patches. Operating systems no longer get patched every 2 to 3 weeks. Operating systems are being patched every few days now because of so many malicious activities are happening out there. So the vendors of the operating systems are having to update their um, software much more quickly and rapidly than having to wait. So make sure your software is up to date. And if you are in business, make sure you have a decent antivirus program installed. Um, Macs, the Mac operating systems are no longer prone or protected from malicious activities. Hackers attack every machine these days. Mac used to be very good about being protected, but that's no longer the case. Sure, the rate of attack is much lower on Mac systems than Windows, but they still get attacked. So make sure you have a good program to protect your machine and your assets. Um, Another approach you can take, use another piece of software, which is known as virtual private network, or short for VPN. And what VPN does, it creates a secure channel from your machine to the destination, whether it's a bank, whether it's another business, whatever that you're trying to communicate and trying to do transaction. So VPN creates a secure channel that makes it extremely hard, if not impossible, for bad guys to break into your communication and read and eavesdrop on what you're doing. Backing up your data, especially if you're in business, you absolutely want to back up your data um, regularly, meaning nightly. That is absolute must, because guess what? When you get attacked, when your machine gets attacked, your data is jeopardized. So you want to make sure you have a safe copy of your data backed up. And when you dump it back enough, you want to disconnect that backup device from your computer. If you don't, that device is part of the computer. So when your computer gets attacked, guess what? That device gets attacked as well. So you back up, make sure you physically disconnect it. Or if you're doing a virtual backup, meaning to some cloud, then have some protection in place. If you cannot disconnect it, there are ways to protect it, whether password protection or whatever mechanism, but you can actually sever the connection between your cloud connection and your machine after you're done with the backup. So make sure your backup is designated. It's separate from your regular, whether you're using OneCloud or Apple Cloud or whatever those systems might be. Make sure you have a designated backup that you purposefully disconnect at the end of the day. Other measures, preventive measures, include, we talked about making sure your software are up to date. Also, making sure the software that hasn't been used in a while, it's removed. So if you haven't used the software, an application software on your machine for your business for, let's say, a couple of months, 2-3 months, you want to remove that software. And the reason for that is old and outdated software provide backdoor for hackers. If a software is not used, most likely it's not being patched. It's not being updated. And that provides a breeding ground for hackers. It provides them with an opportunity, with a vulnerability to break into your system. Make sure when you're using your system for daily activities, you use what's known as non-administrative account. And that's Windows machines are kind of notorious for creating an administrative account when you initially set up the machine. So if you're not sure whether you're using an administrative account or not, we can help you. Reach out to either one of us at the end of the session, and we can walk you through and show you how that's done. But you want to make sure for your daily activities, for your regular browsing activities, you are using a non-administrative account. There's a bit of a pain, bit of a compromise in there, meaning that if you need to install the software, then you're going to have to switch, or the Windows will prompt you, or the system, not just Windows, the system will prompt you for administrative password. that's much safer, because if a hacker breaks into your machine and you are surfing, you are doing activities with an administrative account, then that hacker will become the administrator of that machine. So you don't want that scenario. Another preventive measure, it's using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Many of you might be using this already. When you sign into your bank, after logging in with your username and password, you most likely get a text with some digits and numbers from your institution, and that's a way of multi-factor authentication. So if you're doing business with other organizations, reputable organizations, you want to make sure they have some two-factor authentication mechanism in place that you can take advantage of it. Otherwise, you don't want to submit sensitive information without knowing whether it was you or somebody else did that on behalf of you. And Bluetooth is another vulnerability point. Many of you have seen those hanging chats from your cameras. You know, we stick those little pieces of sticky tapes, and that's a way for hackers to break into your Bluetooth. If you're using, microphones, Bluetooth headphones, when you're not using those devices, go into the settings in your machine and disable the Bluetooth. I know these are all painful steps that we need to take, but you've heard the stories about Amazon voice system being hacked, Alexa being hacked and conversations being recorded without the user's knowledge. Well, they find out about it once the conversation has been posted on other social media channels. So you don't want to find that out the painful way. And of course, you want to use strong passwords for your sensitive communication, and for any place that you log in. Basically, you want to use a strong password, and you don't want to rely on memory for those strong passwords, because our memories are very volatile. So to use a strong passwords, use password generator utilities, and almost all password managers have that feature built in, which brings me to that point of using a password manager. The password managers are a piece of software that keep track of your password. Of course, you need to know that one main password to get into that utility, but at least you have to remember only one. Once you get in, then you can create separate passwords for separate sites. And do not reuse passwords for all your social media accounts. Again, guess what? When the hacker breaks into that and finds out your one password, then he or she can gain access to all of your social media account and pretend act on your behalf as he or she wishes so. And many of these tools and utilities, there are many economical features and options that are available. Many of them you can also find for free. So it doesn't mean you have to go on and spend a whole bunch of money. In fact, I'm using many open source and free options for a number of these utilities, and I can share, and I will share some of these resources at the end with you. So if those are all too much, you say, Meredith, those are too many things I can't keep track of. If you don't do any of those, do just these 4. Don't use an administrative account when you're regularly browsing, when you're doing daily activities on your machine. Use a strong password with a password manager. Back up your sensitive data, your business data, and stay off of public Wi-Fi if at all possible. If you cannot stay away from public Wi-Fi for whatever reason, let's say you're in the middle of the woods, you need to do a business, and there's only one coffee shop with public Wi-Fi, you have to jump on it and use it because you got a client that's waiting for your response. Make sure you use that virtual private network utility, because public Wi-Fi's can be broken into very easily. The guy sitting in that coffee shop next to you, you just don't know what that person is up to. He could be, in fact, he could be setting up a public Wi-Fi with some bogus name, pretending to be that coffee shop's Wi-Fi, and is just setting up a trap, waiting for somebody to step into the trap, revealing his usernames and passwords, and is just right there to harvest it. So if you can at any cost, at least do not do any transaction, any sensitive transactions if you must be on a public Wi-Fi. Use it for leisurely browsing, but do not submit any information on any forms that it's subject to sensitivity. So what's cybersecurity planning? How do you go about planning this? You know, sure, you can take steps here, a step there, harden this piece of device and whatnot. But it comes down to taking a calculated approach, because we're talking about running a business. And even if you're not running a business, if you're just, you know, doing personal activities, you want to take a purposeful measure. Look at security with a planning eye. Treat security as part of your ongoing business plan. You may visit a business plan once a year, but your security plan should be revisited multiple times in a year, because security, it's such a sensitive and such a changing environment. You cannot afford to just do your security planning and put it away for another year. Technology, as you know, changes so rapidly. So you want to be up on your security game. So when you're planning security for your business, there are three pieces really you need to take into consideration. Understand what's your appetite for risk. How much can you afford to lose? Of course, nobody wants to lose anything, right? That's a bit of a oxymoron. Nobody wants to lose money in a business. But when somebody attacks your business, you are going to lose money. So determine how much are you willing to stand. Is it, you know, you have to come up with that. You have to make that judgment call. Is it, you know, $1,000? Is it $200? Is it $10,000? So set that threshold, then plan according to that. And with that planning, you assess your business. You determine how do you go about planning these activities so I can only stomach that much loss. So there are specific steps you need to take when planning your security. First one is knowing what you have as part of your business. At the end of the day, if you don't know what you have in the house, how do you know what's missing? So you need to have a system of inventory. You need to inventory all your devices, electronic devices, and versions and whatnot. And I know this sounds, again, daunting, but once you do the first version, then updating it becomes a lot easier. So we've got another question popping up. I'll let you give you a couple moments to interact with that. Okay. And this inventory doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It could be as simple as a spreadsheet. Start a spreadsheet, and again, we can help you to set that up nicely, neatly, multiple columns, type of operating system or type of device, type of operating system, and whatnot. And the purpose of that is, in case the device goes missing, stolen, becomes damaged, you know exactly what it was. So if you need to replace it, you know what to replace it with. You know, you go with a close match as possible. Again, without knowing what you have, it's hard to replace and repair when something goes missing or gets damaged. The second step of the plan is protecting what you have. Again, we talked about many steps as part of that protection. So safeguarding the assets, you know, all those computers that you have in your shop, phones, if you give phones to your staff, if you distribute, if you have a Wi-Fi set up in your workshop, in your store, those are all part of your assets. And you want to protect those. You want to make sure those are password protected properly. You want to make sure you know who has what. And then, so what do you do when something goes wrong? And again, watch for those behaviors. If your computer starts misbehaving out of a sudden, then you want to be on the lookout. You want to start a little bit of investigation. A couple of weeks ago, in fact, something happened to my own machine. Luckily, it wasn't a virus or attack. It was just some silly behavior. I had a remote keyboard, Bluetooth keyboard, and I had left it in another room. Accidentally, one of the kids dropped a book on it, and I wasn't using the keyboard at the time. And my computer, which I was in another room, started behaving kind of strangely, and it became irresponsive. I started panicking at first, and I was like, okay, I've been attacked. My system has been, taken over by a virus. So I couldn't even log into the machine. Then I went to retrieve that remote keyboard, the wireless keyboard. Then things started to come back to life. So the nature of the story is, become an investigator when you see something strange. When one of your staff reports that, hey, my machine is acting strangely without my intervention, you want to drop everything and start finding out what's going on, because that could lead to something bigger if you don't take the right step. And assuming that you have been attacked and your machine, your systems have been compromised, have the steps in place and know what to do. Your staff need to know what to do when something goes awry. So without having those steps and procedures, it's hard to act rationally and take proper steps. So again, this doesn't need to be anything elaborate. It could be just 4 bullet items. Hey, when we feel like my machine has been taken over by virus, what do? I disconnect it from the network. I disable the user account, or whatever that might be, depending on the nature of the activity, the malicious activity. But have some steps and procedures in place. And lastly, how do you go about, how do you rebound from the attack? All right, so everything is passed, you've recovered, you've responded, you've taken the right action, whether it is to notify your manager, your business owner, or your authority in the area that you were a victim of attack. Now it's time to take the right action to, whether it's to recover your devices, whether to replace them or repair them, because you don't want to have infected device connected to your network, because that's just going to perpetuate the problem. Okay. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the anatomy of what these software, what these malicious activities are. So basically, viruses, spyware, ransomware, these are pieces of software that some guy or gal has purposefully written to do some damage. These are not just randomly created products. These are actually products that actually organizations, not even individuals anymore. Many organizations are behind these activities, and they write purposeful malicious software to do certain damage and to cause certain misbehavior on a given device or on a given network. So we're going to talk about a little bit of characteristics of each. Virus, just like human virus, it gets into the body of the device and it starts damaging things, damaging cells. In this case, cells, we're talking about other components in the computer. It could be a hard drive, it could be a memory, but the intent is to just damage things. Then comes a spyware. A spyware used to be that piece of software that sat on the computer and listened. By listen, I mean virtual listening. It watches the activities and the behavior of the user, what the user is doing, what site he or she is browsing, what kind of purchases is making. And it could be, some of the purposes could be for malicious, just to be able to take advantage of your user's behavior. Some could be less malicious, that they just want to know your behavior so they can sell you products, to get to know you. And then the most malicious type is the ransomware, combination of virus and the spyware, brings it all together. So ransomware is a piece of software that basically sits on your network, on your device. You may not even know for a long time that this ransomware is on your property. It's on your machine. It just sits there listening and listening and watching the behavior and waits for the right time to strike. And the right time could be harvesting valuable data about your customers. Many of you might have heard recently that Garmin, one of the makers of the sports watches and all that, became a victim of a ransomware, and the company ended up paying a few $1 million to get out of the situation. And as bad as it is, a lot of people advise against paying the ransomware money, because paying that money, it just creates misbehavior. It rewards the bad behavior among the actors. However, in Garmin's case, Garmin is not just the maker and the operator of sports utility watches, but they operate, they have their hands in aviations and many other industries. So that's why they had no choice but to pay, because without paying for that ransomware and getting out of the situation, many industries could have been affected. So that's how these bad actors operate. They know when to strike and how to strike. They wait for the right moment and the big buck to make. So that's where the value of backing up the data properly and in a secure manner becomes really important. The big factor about ransomware is that this bad actor or actors, they lock your files away and they encrypt it, which means that they scramble the log code that you as the owner don't even have access to your data. So they nicely package it, bundle up the data, tuck it away, and put a lock on it. And you don't even know what that lock is. And that's where they come back with asking for whatever the price they think is right for all their effort. So all of this really starts with simple email, phishing email. So the composition or the anatomy of a phishing email comes down to human behavior in conjunction with an email. You get an email, innocent looking email. Hey, Jim, I'm stuck in whatever, I was vacationing. Now I've run out of money. Can you please wire a couple $1,000 so I can get out of here? Using that simple method and putting that in with emotions next to it and knowing a few things about the recipient, the bad actor gets to play tricks on the recipient of that email. So when you receive such emails, when you receive an email that you're not expecting, take a minute before you click on that reply or whatever the link might be. Usually, but almost 100%, there is a link in the email that says click here to do something, either to unlock your account or to reset your password or to do something, to take some action. Before you click on that link, if you can't afford, walk away from the email. Again, assuming that you're not expecting that email. So walk away. If you cannot bring yourself to delete the email because you think it bears some importance, then walk away, come back a couple of minutes later and read it again, see if it makes sense. And if it still makes sense, but looks suspicious, your gut feeling tells you that there's something wrong with this email, you're still in a control chair. You still can take some control. Meaning, if it's from an organization, instead of clicking on the email, go to the website of the organization. If it's from a dear friend of yours, supposedly from a dear friend, try to find that friend in some other way. If you can call him or her, if you can somehow contact his relatives to make sure whether that person is actually on vacation, just to find out some more facts and information before you actually do anything. So it's all about social engineering. It's about getting to know the victim personally So be aware of those suspicious looking emails. So in the business domain, these really are known as the business email compromise. Really kind of the big buzzword for phishing emails. And phishing emails fall into three categories. We no longer, actually very few of these bulk phishing emails come through, which usually start as dear valued customer or hi there, without any name, without any identification. These don't happen much anymore. Now, the bad guys have moved on to what's known as a spear phishing. They're targeted. They know a thing or two about their victim. They know some of their habits. So they target them with specific actions. They call you by name. They may even use some of your behavior in the body of the email. Hey, remember we took that trip? Hey, remember we purchased that item, whatever. And so they try to hook you with some personal behavior and likes and dislikes. So be aware, again, what the intent of that email is and whether you're actually expecting that. And then comes whaling. Whaling is targeted toward big people, people with some reputation. These could be CEOs, CIOs, CFOs. And you'll be surprised that many of these reputable people, because they're so busy, they don't get to actually follow some of the good practices and train themselves and some of the security measures that they need to follow. And that's what the bad guys are counting on. They know that not all of these big guys have the time to go through the pertinent training. So they craft a really attractive email with a lot of personal behaviors and traits embedded in that email that just hooks the user, the reader, and makes them to click on that notorious link, and that's how they fall victim. So when it comes to selecting technology for your business, this is bit of a philosophical yet pragmatic question. When you go purchase a technology or select a technology for your business, stop and ask yourself, how much value do I expect from this piece of technology? What risk am I willing to take, and what's the cost? So everything comes at a cost. There is no free lunch. So be aware. If somebody offers you a free software, there is a cost somewhere. What's the risk with that? And how much risk are you willing to take? Basically comes down to return on investment. How much value are you going to get out of that technology? And yeah, just be aware of what you're selecting, what you're purchasing, what's the purpose. Typically ask at the minimum 3 whys. Why am I doing this? And the next why and the next why. You get to answer your own questions. If that piece of technology, piece of investment is really worth it for your business. And just like anything in life, technology comes with its challenges. Obviously, we've been talking about keeping up. Keeping up with technology is a major challenge with rapidly changing technological advancements. It's hard to keep up. And that's why many businesses go out and work with professionals to make sure their systems, their assets are kept up to date. Of course, being safe, and that's the intent, part of the intent of this presentation. How do you keep safe when you're out there? You want to play safe, you want to do business safely. And to do that, you want to adopt some good practices, and you want to teach your staff. You might be practicing all good practices, following good things, but if your staff aren't up on their games, guess what? That's a vulnerability. So make sure your staff are following those good practices and they're staying up to date with those. If you're in business, you know that there are different segments and sectors of technology, whether it's retail, whether it's manufacturing, back office or different services. They all use different pieces of technology. What all of these technologies have in common is they're all networked one way or another. It's hard to do business these days with a simple PC that is isolated, is not connected to anything. You cannot do business with that anymore. I can't think of any business that can do business in an isolated manner. So that's what, as powerful as networks are, that's what creates the danger as well. So that's the intent of networking, is be aware, be aware what your computers, what your systems are connected to. Don't just connect your systems to any network haphazardly. Be mindful about what networks you're purchasing, connecting, and working with. So all that matters. This is a bit for actually mostly for your information, and this is about browsing anonymously. And the purpose of making you aware of this, if for whatever reason, if you want to browse out there, browse the web anonymously, so far that I know of, there's only one browser, which is called Tor, that allows for anonymous browsing. And typically, journalists, reporters, and other activists working in countries under oppression, they use, if they can access that browser, that's what they use, because they want to be completely anonymous. They don't want to leave any track. All other browsers that I'm aware of, they leave tracks in one shape or form. And there's a website out there. This is a informative website, which I've been looking at and doing some reading. They provide, this is actually an interactive diagram, and you go out there and you click on these different buttons, which enables combination of Tor browser with HTTPS, which is a secure protocol, versus HTTP. As you type in an address on your address bar of the browser, you notice it starts with HTTP, most likely nowadays with HTTPS. So if you flip these switches with or without Tor or HTTPS, you can see what entities along the way can eavesdrop on your communication. For instance, if you select, if you go with no Tor and no HTTPS protocol, pretty much anybody along the way can see what communication you're transmitting, including the bad guys, including your internet service provider, the authorities, and of course, we're talking about people who have the right skills and the authority to do that. I'm not trying to give the impression that anybody can just do this kind of eavesdropping. We're talking about people with the authority. The reason we have lawyer here, assuming that the lawyer has obtained the right permission to eavesdrop. So, but that, yes, they can see what communication you're transmitting. Whereas if you use Tor with HTTPS protocol, really none of those entities, and again, there are exceptions, there are details, you can see what pieces of information they can and cannot see. For instance, your ISP provider using Tor, they will not even be able to determine your destination on the web. So if you're interested, give that a try, flip the switches on and off and see what communication and what transmissions are being available to different parties. And this is just a little bit more about what kind of software are available out there. Freeware doesn't necessarily mean open source. It's just a free software. Open source, it's a separate class on its own. And you can find a lot of freeware these days, and also many open source products if you're interested. The challenge with open source, although the challenge is not as big as it used to be 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, open source products used to be very cumbersome to work with. That's no longer a case. Many open source products are very easy, and they have very supportive community to lend a hand to help users along the way because they want to promote that usage because it just creates better communities. So if you're not happy with your current Office vendor, if you're not happy with your current operating system, there are many options out there. And then the other end of the scale is what's known as freemium. You can find free products, which the core product is free, but then if you want to take advantage of additional features and services, then you need to pay for those. There are client relationship management packages, there are social media marketing products, and again, only the core products typically are free, but then once you step above those basic features, then you have to pay some fee to take advantage of those advanced features. But there are no shortage of options these days when it comes to technology. That brings us to the end of the presentation. I've provided a couple of pages of resources, additional readings if you're interested in following up in any of these subjects that we talked about on encryption, on open source, and a few other things. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Paula.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mirdad. I really, this is so helpful for everyone that's running a business, making us think outside the box and just getting us to really do the things we need to protect our business. And certainly this is something we're all facing. So really appreciate that information. And folks, if you could, we have a survey here at the end. And if you wouldn't mind providing us with some input and feedback, remember that Mirdad is a mentor as well, and his expertise can be used for your business. So definitely check in with us if you're interested in having a mentor. We do have some questions that we're going to be asking you in a minute, but I do also want you to know that we have some other upcoming workshops. We want you to have that opportunity to go to those workshops. As you can see, my cat is now joining our meeting. This is the joy of Zoom. So, this day and age, this is my cybersecurity. I do want to have an opportunity for folks to engage with Mirdad and have some information from him. So let me move on to the questions. And also for those folks, if you could, getting into the survey as well. One of the questions, Mirdad, is using a VPN dramatically slows down your system. Is this true? And if so, is there a VPN type solution that does not slow down the speed of your system?
Yes, that is true. VPN, because it creates another layer on top of your original communication channel. So yes, it slows things down. So it is, if your business is dependent, absolutely dependent on any small degradation on speed, make sure you pick a VPN that is regional. So if you, for instance, if you live in US and there are a lot of VPN services in Europe, so obviously depending on with who you do business, where your business partners are located, it does matter. So do some research. Again, just like many things in life, especially technology, you want to do some research, you want to find out, read some reviews about the VPN vendor of that virtual private network. You want to understand, in terms of cost, in terms of speed, in terms of security, the security protocols that they use. Each company uses different security protocol. So yes, you want to do some research and find out, if possible, find a regional vendor of the VPN, which will degrade the speed no matter what. But if it's a regional, if it's a local provider, then that degradation will be very minuscule, almost not noticeable.
And that VPN can be used as needed. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, you can turn the VPN on and off. In fact, I have a VPN on my machine and I don't use it all the time. Only if I'm outside my secure network and I need to do a transaction, then I turn it on, do my transaction, turn it off. I'm trying to find an analogy. Is basically another layer of security. You don't want to I'm not, my brain is not finding the right analogy. I'm usually good at finding analogies, not right now. Let's see. Um, yeah, it's just a security channel that you can turn on and off. It doesn't have to be on all the time. So you want to make sure you use it judiciously, especially if it's a paid one. Again, depending on the subscription. Some of them are unlimited, some of them are usage based. So you have to kind of weigh in on those cons and pros.
So one of the other questions, how do you deal with ransomware?
I'll let you know when I find out. That's a very, so how do you deal with ransomware? Very, very difficult. If you get into that situation, again, that's where number of the security preventive measures we talked about come into play. If you have a good backup of your data, you can easily walk away from ransomware situation. If you get presented with a dollar figure that, hey, you know what, $50,000, or I'm just going to destroy your machine. If you have a good backup of your data tucked away, you can basically say, thank you very much. You can destroy the machine. I have a backup. Sure, it's hard. I know. I'm not, by any means, I'm not trying to make these scenarios easy, but taking the right measures. Whereas if you don't have a backup, and now let's say if you got sensitive client data being tucked away, basically being stolen, now you have no choice. And the other piece of it is there is no ethicality when it comes to ransomware. The gal or the guy on the other side of the wire, he may tell you, or she may tell you that, you know what, pay me this money and I'll release your files. There is no guarantee. There is no ethicality in that word. He or she may decide to release the files or may not. There goes your money and so your files. So it's a very difficult situation. There is no easy answer to it. But taking good measures, having a backup in a safe and secure manner alleviates the pain a little bit.
So one specific question is Kaspersky good or spyware, and what about for Macs?
Yeah, Kaspersky, based on what I've seen, it's a good product. And in fact, Kaspersky, I have a reference at the bottom of my presentation that you'll receive. You may have heard about the Stuxnet, the big virus or the big spyware back in 2009, 2010. Kaspersky was the one that initially noticed that misbehavior with the nuclear facility in Iran, and they are very good when it comes to security. They actually have good office products for office settings for businesses. So I would again, I'm not endorsing any product. That's not the intent here. I'm just providing my feedback, providing my experience. I've seen good things about Kaspersky, yes.
Great. And then folks, for the survey, definitely jump into the chat and get that survey done. These last few questions, I think I'm going to kind of couple together. If maybe you could speak to the implication of remote work and the use of personal devices for business purposes, maybe the development of policies per se.
Right. I'm assuming these are all related to small business owners that are concerned in some way or shape about allowing their staff work remotely. Yes, that is a concern. However, you can alleviate those concerns if your staff are using their own personal devices to access your business assets, then you want to make sure either you can provide them, if you can afford, you can provide them with some security defenders, such as products that we talked about earlier, virus scanner. You want to make sure that device is protected. You want to make sure those users use a strong password to access your network. You want to make sure the data is backed up, because guess what? It's your business on the line. You don't want to, just like you wouldn't let, a physical property, you're not going to let anybody just walk in, to your shop and open the cash register and look at your cash register, right? It's the same concept. You're not going to you don't want anybody just walking into your network and start, rummaging around and looking at what you have and take whatever he or she wishes to. So these could be simple. Again, you don't have to create elaborate policies, it could be a simple 1 or 2 page documentation. Okay, these are the guidelines for my business. If you want to use the personal property, personal laptop, personal equipment, make sure you use a strong password. Make sure your data gets backed up. Make sure you use password manager. Make sure if you're doing transaction for my business, make sure you use VPN. You're not going to just hop on VPN. And you can make these a stick by, again, simple language, a one-page document. In fact, I can also share with Paula and others who can distribute those. I have a one-page kind of a infographic about what steps you can take to kind of get ahead of some of these security concerns. It's about using secure methods, using strong password, and you can. And the idea is to you can distribute that one pager to your staff, and if they can, just for instance, put it on the wall as a reminder. They can have it in front of them in their front page or whatever on the wall that, hey, I need to take these steps. So it's about reiterating, practicing some of those good behavior.
I think that would be super helpful. And we will be providing the presentation slides to the participants as well. That was one of the other questions. But
Sure.
Mirdad, again, thank you so much for your participation. Folks, if you're interested in getting mentoring or participating in our other 2 workshops around marketing, please sign up and join us. We really appreciate your support and coming out tonight, and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, and hope to hear from you.
Have a great night.
You as well. Bye-bye.